Hey everyone, welcome back to the Modern Knotwork channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing sizing of blankets. This is going to be your ultimate size guide for making a chunky knit blanket. The most frequent questions I get are around sizing, people asking how many loops should I do, how many rows does my blanket need, how many balls of yarn, etc., etc. So let's go over these 4 sizes. This is going to be a baby blanket size. This will be a small or child size blanket. This will be a medium to large adult throw. And the one at the top is a queen size. Starting down here with the baby blanket, I personally make my baby blankets about 24 inches by 32 inches. And in order to get that size, I do a starting chain of 20 loops. So let's just take a look and double check that this 20 loop chain does equal 24 inches, and it does. So keep in mind, for a baby blanket this size, you're going to need 2 skeins of the Bernat Blanket Big yarn. You can see on the label here, it's 32 yards per skein. So if you're using a different brand of yarn, just take note of how many yards come in 1 skein of yarn. For our second example, which is the small or child size blanket, this is going to measure roughly 30 inches by 50 inches. So my starting row is 24 loops, and you can see that it measures 30 inches. Again, if you prefer counting rows instead of measuring as you go, I would recommend doing approximately 65 rows. And for a child-sized blanket, you're going to need 4 skeins of yarn. Let's move on to our third example, which is this adult or large size throw. This is the most common size that I make. I find it just a perfect size for snuggling on the couch or even for decor, whatever you prefer. So these adult or large size blankets are roughly 42 inches by 60 inches. And in order to get that size, you're going to make your starting chain 30 loops. Let's just verify that this is 42 inches, and it is. For this adult size throw, you're going to aim for roughly 80 rows, and you will need 6 skeins of yarn. Now this top size is a queen size, which I have never personally made myself, but I actually get a lot of questions about sizing for a queen size blanket. A queen size blanket, I would recommend doing about 60 inches by 80 inches. And in that case, your starting chain is going to be 48 loops. For your queen size throw, I would recommend doing roughly 120 to 140 rows. But to be honest, with doing a blanket this size, I would highly recommend measuring instead of counting your rows. It's going to be a lot easier. For the queen size blanket, you will need roughly 12 skeins of yarn. For the next part of this video, I'd like to go over an example together showing you how you can calculate the number of rows you'll need for your project and the number of skeins you'll need. This blanket is actually the first one I ever made. You can see it's kind of getting loose now, but it is the adult size throw, and it's 42 by 60. So let's go through this together as if we're just starting our blanket completely from the beginning, and the only thing we know is that we'd like it to be 42 by 60 when we finish. I've just turned the blanket and folded it up so it's a little bit easier to see. What I would do first is I would make my foundation chain, and using my measuring tape, I would stop when I get to my desired length of 42 inches. For me, 42 inches is equal to 30 loops. So I know for the rest of my blanket, every single row is going to be 30 loops. Now, in terms of the rows, my preference is to just hand knit and measure as I go and stop when I get to my desired length of 60 inches. However, if you are someone that just prefers to have a plan, or if you're doing a blanket that has stripes or multiple colors and you need to plan out how many rows of each you're doing, I suggest using this calculation to figure out the number of rows that you want to plan for. What we're going to do is take the number of loops in our chain and multiply by 2.7 to get an approximation of the number of rows that we'll need. In this example, the chain has 30 loops, So we multiply 30 by 2.7, which gives us 81 rows. Depending on the pattern you're doing, you might find it helpful to round up or round down to the nearest even number. So you could make a plan of doing 80 rows, and let's say you're using 8 colors, so that's going to be 10 rows per color, and it's just planned out very nicely and easily for you. And using this calculation, you can know that 80 rows is going to give you a blanket that's approximately 42 by 60. Now, if you'd like to try to calculate how many skeins of yarn you'll need, I recommend trying this calculation. What we're going to do is first calculate the square inches that our blanket will be. So let's use this blanket as an example. I want this blanket to be 42 by 60 inches. So my calculation will be 42 times 60, which equals 2,520 square inches for the whole blanket. Once I know my square inches, I will divide that number by 420. So in this blanket, it's 2,520 square inches divided by 420, which equals 6. And that number 6 is the number of skeins that I will plan for my project. These calculations obviously aren't perfect, but it can help you get a little bit of a plan for your blanket. Let's use another example, which would be a queen blanket, where I recommended doing 60 by 80 inches. So you would multiply 60 by 80 to get your square inches, which is 4,800 square inches. Then we'll take 4,800, divide by 420, and that gives you 11.4 skeins of yarn. Because you obviously can't buy 11.4 skeins of yarn, you would round up and purchase 12 and just have a little bit left over. I hope this size guide video was helpful. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions about the examples I showed, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.